What is up, you guys? Sage here. The way to the top seems linear from afar, but the closer you are to it, the more you realize that there are those micro ups and downs. Um, and you really feel those ups and downs when you're in it. When you're actually living it day to day, when you're living that progression, it doesn't to you, it doesn't feel like you're making as much progress as you actually are. But if you look at things in terms of on a year to year basis, or you look at things on even your progress on long-term projects, you'll find that you are actually treading in the right direction, and you're increasing in the way that you would like to be. But for you, I'll give you the YouTube example. Started at zero. Now we're at a certain amount. On the way, there were stints where we were going rapid. Then there were stints where things slowed down a little bit. Now things are climbing steadily. Maybe they go, and you look at the views skyrocket, and then they chill, and then this that, then there's one video pops, and then other video goes really low. So within the micro, you feel every single sharp curve. If you ever look at a line graph, like the further out you look at it, the more straight the lines are gonna be. The more uh, predictable the pattern looks like it actually is. But as soon as you zoom into it, then you start to see those micro fluctuations, right? And so I urge you, when you are in those, when you're in those ups and downs, Patrick David once said, and I'll quote him: "You're never as good as you think you are when you're winning, and you're never as bad as you think you are when you're losing." Because when you enter winning ways, you tend to get into situations where people are giving you all the credit in the world, and you're the smartest man alive, and wow, how'd you see that, how'd you do that, how are you so consistent, how are you so, how are you improving so rapidly, in these spaces. But what they don't see, what they don't realize, is the fact that I'll give you an like a working example. I'll give you a scholar example, academic example. Say you're working on a project, right? You're working on a project, or you're working on an assignment, and little by little, in some inkling, or in some stupid way, you find a way to kind of get a little bit done each day. And to yourself, you really feel like, man, I could have given a lot more, but my attention was, it's split between this and this. Like, in order to do something great, you need a great amount of attention, and an incredible amount of attention to detail, etc. And when you realize how much time it takes to be great, you realize how few things you can actually do if you want them to be worth doing, right? But still, we are people, and we are multifaceted individuals, and we do want to be great scholars, as we do want to be great businessmen, as we do want to be great sons and daughters, as we do want to be great fathers and mentors, great leaders, great learners, we want to follow our mentors, and make them proud, and continue to learn in that way. But we also want to be imparting, so there are a lot of checks and balances that we need to make, even in a life where you have hyper trimmed things down, to as minimal distraction as possible. There are things that are going to cause those fluctuations, and when you're in them, I would say, a word from me to you would be, don't panic, which is really a word from me to myself, if we're being completely honest. 99.9% of the time, for people who don't know this, most of the time, if I'm shouting at the camera, if I'm shouting at you, the audience, about something, it's because I'm screaming at myself, because I've fallen victim to, for example, I'm learning the same lesson over and over again. The pretty girl who doesn't really seem to be interested in you, but she is interested enough, and pretty enough, that you're willing to compromise on certain. Do you get what I'm trying to say? And it always ends the same way, the way that you knew it was going to end before you even got into it. But she was so pretty that you forgot what the objective was. You forgot what the main aim was, and you're losing yourself in that now. You know. So when I scream, for example, about it, don't get lost in the sauce. Focus. Remember why you are places. It's because I constantly have to remind myself why I'm places. And I constantly fall short of that ideal. And so we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught. And so in the moments when I'm kind of, smacked on the hand and reminded of what the purpose of what we do is, then it is my duty that I've taken onto myself to not only take lessons from those moments, take lessons from whatever pain I may experience, but to articulate it in a way where it is digestible and where it hits home in a way where you don't have to go through what I go through. And so Naval Ravikant, he's a billionaire now, someone who, a CEO, entrepreneur, a bit of a philosopher. Like there's not many things that you can take away from it. He's just a brilliant, brilliant guy all around. I read one of his books as well, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. I watched one of his podcasts recently, in which he mentions if he were to go back and give younger him a bit of advice, or Chris Williamson, he's on Chris Williamson's podcast, and Chris Williamson asked him if he were to go back and give his younger self a bit of advice, what would it be, right? Um, to which he replied, he wouldn't change anything, or I'll speak as Naval. He said, I wouldn't change anything. I would do the exact same things. I would just be less emotional towards them. Meaning, when you are in those fluctuations, when you're on a up, you tend to get you tend to get high, and you tend to get lost in that high to the point where it leads to a bigger down than what was necessary. And when you're on a down, you tend to get lost in that, and you think that there like everything else that you've done before is now discredited because you were in this position that you were in, and that's actually not the case. And that's not the case. Rationally speaking, that life is cyclical. What goes up must come down. And if you are pulling a spring, if you are pulling an elastic down far enough, then as soon as you let that go, it will super compensate. I was explaining this to a friend of mine in terms of um, it wasn't just about muscle, it was about learning in general, resilience. In terms of building muscle, the way that happens is you have a baseline, you break the body down and it goes below baseline, and then it super compensates. And so if your baseline was here, now your baseline is here, and then you break it down again, it goes a bit further, super compensates, then comes back down. And so that's why when you're breaking it down, it will go below baseline, and then you get that pump, which is going to, if this is baseline, you're going here, you're getting the pump, which is bringing you here. Now your baseline is over there, and so on and so forth. And same thing with learning. That's why you always need to be operating just outside your capacity, just outside your capabilities. Otherwise, you'll never be more than you are. If you never do more than you can do, you'll never be more than you are. And so within applying that philosophy, you will find yourself in positions where, going back to Naval, it's not just emotional that he was talking about. He's talking about anger, or a stress, or he was speaking of those negative kind of emotions that we tend to harbor, an anxiety, a tension, a pressure. And he realizes in retrospect that there's a lot of things that he would have done anyway, it would have had to do anyway in order to succeed. Just doing those things without the negative emotion would have just created a more pleasant experience. And what is it at the end of the day? At the end of the day, I'm a firm believer that we live, we like, you're born, you have experiences, you die. What you choose to give as a meaning to those experiences will shape your reality, will shape your identity, will shape everything. And so that being said, if we take that, and we apply that premise of we are going to do certain things, or certain things have to be done in order to succeed, then if you experience those things with a relative lack of giving them the meaning of negativity, if you are in the downs and you're not taking a down as a negative thing, what if a down is just a learning curve? Like I the reason why like if life was just up up up, then I wouldn't really learn anything in life. I wouldn't really leave life with any particular tidbits or any sort of words to the wise. Like wisdom is based off of losses, is based off of failures turned into lessons. And I've said this once, and I'll say it again. The only difference between winners and losers is that losers are buried by their failures, whereas winners are standing on top of them because they didn't allow failure to stop them. So life being what it is, those ups and downs. Don't give the downs any meaning. Don't give the ups too much meaning either, because at the end of the day, and Kobe Bryant who said this, which is, we win, awesome. I'm gonna have to get up tomorrow and work. We lose, that sucks. I'm gonna have to get up tomorrow and work. And that is the reality of it. And I think my belief, the most beautiful thing that you can find in life is a love for the craft, a love for the journey, a love for the ups and the downs, a love for the idea of waking up each day, refining your craft, getting a little bit better at doing what you do until you eventually become the person that you want to become. You know, and I think a predisposition to get to that place is to have somewhere that you want to be. So if you're not on that journey, and you can't really relate to what I'm talking about, then I think you're still in the prequel. You're still in that foundation phase, where before you start laying the foundation is just drafting it, just a rough draft. Jeff Bezos talks about stubborn with the vision, but flexible with the details. And so kind of shoot for the stars, you know, and perhaps you'll land on the moon. But you'll realize in on the way to the stars, even if you do land on the moon, you'll realize that it was never about getting to the stars. It was about becoming who you needed to become in order to embark on the journey, and in order to develop through the stages on the journey. And that is what it is about ultimately. And so it is not about that zoomed out version where you're seeing a straight line. There's no story in that. There's no glory in that. The greatest victories are the ones that follow major loss. Yeah, I'll cap it at that. If you did in fact enjoy today's video, please do hit that subscribe button. I have been Sage, standing on business. Signing out.